Hey, I want to welcome all of you that maybe were out last week as we had a holiday weekend, and I want you to know we started a brand new series last Sunday in the book of Ecclesiastes. So go ahead and get your Bibles or your devices or whatever you're using today. Go ahead and start turning there with me. It's in the Old Testament. And I want you to know that if you missed last week, it's really important that you go back this upcoming week and that you listen to what we taught last week, because I gave you a bit of an introduction and gave you some lenses for you to be able to look at this book of Ecclesiastes, because it's a challenging book. And you can listen on our podcast, on Spotify, you can go to our website, you can go to YouTube, it's there, okay? And it's really important that you do this. Yes, I'm on a treadmill. I want to say hello to those of you who are watching online. We love you guys. Can we give it up for them who are watching online? We know that there are a lot of you all over the nation. And here's the thing. I'm on the treadmill today because I was looking at my calendar this week. And man, are any of you guys busy? How many of you are busy? Just life is jam-packed. I like to try to pack as much as I can into a day because I like to maximize my time. And so a lot of times I find myself multitasking. And I thought, you know what, this week I got to be sure to get some workouts in because I'm trying to take care of myself a little better. So I thought, you know what, I'll just work a workout in. I'm doing this 3 times, by the way. I already did it once, okay? I'll get 3 workouts in today while I'm trying to bring you the word. And I already sweat quite a bit whenever I'm regular preaching, so I want to apologize up front if you catch the glisten off of my bald head, because that's the way it is, all right? Now, in Ecclesiastes, we're going to look there in a second, but you know, on October 6th in 1993, that was a day that lived in sports history. And you say, what happened on that day? Well, it was a significant day because someone who is known as, at least in my generation, arguably as the GOAT of all-time basketball, the greatest of all time, decided for some reason at age 30 that he was going to throw in the towel and retire. And this guy had just kind of reached the pinnacle of his career. That NBA season had netted him $40 million, and that was in the 90s. He had more endorsement deals that was making him more money than he ever could know what to do with. He had won 3 world championships so far at this point. He had 7 consecutive NBA scoring titles. And he faced this crowd who just, when word was trickling out that potentially he was going to retire, people came from all over the world to this press conference when Michael Jordan said these words: "The game offers me no more challenges. I've achieved everything that I want to achieve." And he said, I just don't really, when I look at this next NBA season, I feel like it's time that I just call it a career. And I remember I was in college at the time and I was stunned. I love basketball and I love watching that. I remember one of my college roommates, I think he cried whenever Michael Jordan quit. We were like, what is going on? Why would a man who has everything under the sun decide to walk away? Well, if you know anything about MJ's story, you know this, that year that he retired, his father, who had been at every game, had been murdered. And he said this, and I quote him, "One thing about my father's death was that it reinforced how life can be taken away from you at any time." Would you agree with that? I mean, there are things that just put life in perspective. And the stuff of life for Michael Jordan had kind of lost its meaning. What he felt like basketball had brought, and he had such a competitive edge, what it had brought to him, he was at this place, and some of you can probably relate to where he was like, you know what, I've been there, I've done that, now what? Been there, done that. Some of you, maybe you think of it, you know, a little more along the lines of it's just kind of like the same old, same old. 3,000 years ago, there was a man who had more power, he had more wealth, he had more authority, more fame than even Michael Jordan had. And he asked the same kind of questions in this book of Ecclesiastes. What is the meaning of life? I mean, I have it all. What's the point? bothering with this if this is all there really is, even though I have it all? And the man who asked these questions was a man that we discovered last week, is a man by the name of Solomon. Now, in Ecclesiastes, there is a part where it says the words of the preacher. We learn that there is a narrator, and we learn that the voice that we will be hearing is the voice of Solomon. And this voice is who is known, and the Hebrew word is Kohelet. And Kohelet, preacher is not really the best way of putting it. It's more kind of speaker. It can be translated as teacher. And it's important, as we established last week, that we understand that it most likely was Solomon who was the voice. We believe that it was him because this really reads like just his life story as we read this. Now, he never identifies himself. But we have some really good clues, and we said we were going to establish, as we go forward in this throughout this entire fall, that we look in this book, that this is the voice of Solomon. Now, why does it matter that it's Solomon? Because Solomon is the perfect representation, and we learn this, of the apex of what we would classify as human success. What does that look like? Having all the money, all the power, all of these things, and Solomon had gotten to this place at the pinnacle of his life, at the pinnacle of Israel's history, at this high point, and he had gotten to this place where he was like, it's just the same old, same old. I just feel like this is all that that it's like the same thing every day, and it's not unusual for me on a regular basis whenever I run into people maybe out in the community to say, hey man, how's it going? How are things going for you? And I can't tell you how many times I've felt this, but I can't tell you how many times I've heard this from many of you. Man, Bart, it's just the same old, same old. It's just, that's kind of how it is. I sat not long ago with a man who was in our church. He's kind of going through a tough time. He's in a little bit of a midlife crisis. And as we were talking, I said, tell me what's going on. And he said, Bart, I just feel like this. This is my life. I'm like in this rut. I feel like I get up, I go to work, I work hard all day. I come home, I eat, I watch TV, I fall asleep in my chair. I finally make my way to the bed. And you know what I do? I do it all over again the next day. And maybe you can relate to this. And then he said this. He said, I just am so tired. I'm so tired. And then he said, and I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired. You ever felt like that? And so many people feel this way. Solomon was feeling these feelings that we're all familiar with at certain times. He was on this great search for meaning in his life. He was trying to find it, and he was trying to get his hands around this. And that's what the book of Ecclesiastes records for us, is this journey that he goes on and what is known as life under the sun. And we really kind of dug in on that last week. That's why, again, you need to, I'll mention it some again today, but you need to kind of understand what he's getting at. Now, Solomon is going to bring forth some truths that they're kind of hard for some of us to swallow. Some of us will deny this. Some of us will dismiss some of these things. Some of us, we don't really like to think about some of these things because, they're really challenging. He's going to push you to some edges that I really believe that every person needs to get to kind of deal with these things. And so what we understand, and I'll get to some of these truths here in just a minute, but until we get to a place of actually choosing what we'll call acceptance and accepting what some of these truths are, until you can get to this place, here's what you're going to find. You're going to find that you're just constantly churning against the grain. You're constantly just wondering, why in the world does it seem like it's always so hard? And I'm not saying that it won't be hard for you, even when you understand these things, but you're going to be a little more free in understanding just some basic things about these truths. Now let's look at verse 1, Ecclesiastes chapter 1. And I'm gonna back up into verse 1 because I want to be sure those of you that missed that you kind of get the context of this. We believe this is the narrator here who's speaking in. He says, the words of the preacher, that's Kohelet, okay? The son of David, king in Jerusalem, and that helps us understand that it most likely was Solomon. And then he's going to say this, and now I need your help because I'm going to be struggling here in a little bit, okay? All right? And so I want us to read verse 2 out loud together. You online, you say it with me as well. Come on, everybody help me out. I need help reading this. Say it with me. Vanity of vanities, says the preacher. Vanity of vanities. All is, what does he say? Do you think he's trying to drive a point home? What does he mean by that? We learned last week that that is his thesis for the entirety of the book. That is what this entire book is about. Now, that word vanity, we don't quite, today we read that and we think, what does he mean by that? Is he talking about whenever we look in front of the mirror and, we say, oh man, I'm looking good and boy, I'm kind of vain? That's not what he's getting at. It's this word in the Hebrew, this word havel. And remember, we talked last week about what that word means. It's this word, now it can be translated futility. It can be translated, some say meaninglessness, but or that there's no meaning there, and I think that goes a little too far. But here's what havel literally means. It's this right here. Now let me ask you, is that real? It's real, but can you get your hands around it? And where is it right now? By the way, that feels pretty good. Okay, I'm good with that. That's not bad, right? And by the way, if I see if anybody's sleeping, then I'm gonna twist this and then I'm gonna get you, okay? And I'll wake you up. But it's this idea of it's here, and then I think I've got my hands around it, and then tell me what? It's gone. But it was real, wasn't it? Yes, that's what he's getting at. A better way of thinking about this is that this life under this broken, under the sun, this cursed world, here's what he's saying, is fleeting. All these things that we pursue, many of them are fleeting. It would be like life is a breath. Here's the idea of this. Now, as I'm saying, think about your breathing right now. The average adult will breathe somewhere between 12 and 20 times in a minute. I'm probably doing a little more than you are right now. But here is the point. You're thinking about the breath you just took, but I promise you, you had no thought of the breath that happened before that one. It happened. It was here. It's gone. But you didn't even remember it. And this is what he's getting at. Do you feel the desperation? I told you would feel tension in this, right? Solomon is assessment of life. And you're online. You can feel this too. He's struggling. He's really struggling. He's trying to figure it out. You say, Bart, this feels desperate. It feels bleak. You're right. It is. Life under the sun is a challenge. Now, this next verse, in verse 3, is what we will say is this verse that really encapsulates the entirety of the book. You could be reading Ecclesiastes, and by the way, I urged all of you to go read it. If you haven't, read it this week. It'll take you just to break it into a couple of times, but just be sure you read this for yourself at some point. But if you're in the middle of it and you wonder, what is he talking about? You can know that this is an anchor verse, and you can know that he is fleshing out this verse right here, verse 3, and here's what verse 3. Now remember, he's looking through a limited lens, and we talked about that last week. I don't have time to go into that today, so you need to go listen. But what I will say to help some of you today, we have the benefit of being able to look back and know what Christ achieved, to know what Jesus did. Solomon is looking forward. He's 1,000 years prior to Jesus, and he doesn't quite get this, and so he has a veiled lens, and so he's feeling this frustration about everything seems to be pointless. It seems to be leading to death. He knows that death is coming for him, and so he says this in verse 3. What does man gain by all the toil at which he toils under the sun? What does he gain? This word gain is a word, it's an accounting term, it's a business term, it's a profit. What does he gain by all the investment, by all the hours, by all the toil I put in and day out, and then I kind of subtract my achievements and my accomplishments and all these things, and when I look at the sum total of what my life comes down to, man, it feels like I haven't gained anything. It feels like I'm going nowhere. What does it profit a man? Now, doesn't that sound familiar? What does it profit a man to gain the whole world? Somebody else said that. What does it profit a man to gain the whole world? Now, Solomon would say, because I have gained the whole world. I've got everything at my command. It's at my disposal. I have money. I have power. I have armies. I have all of this. I have relationships. I can have anything I want. And you know what? He says it all comes down to, that's it. There it goes. It's gone. It's there, but it's gone. Now the teacher is not trying to just make you feel good today, is he? He's not trying to give you the warm fuzzies. He's confronting you. He's wanting you, and I believe every one of us, whether you're a believer or an unbeliever today, all are welcome here. I believe every person needs to come to terms and have the intellectual honesty to determine why you believe what you believe. Why do you anchor to what you are anchored to, regardless of what you believe? And so what he's going to do in verses 4 through 11 is he's going to bring a poem in. Now, this poem is what is called a chiastic poem. Now, where do we get that word chiastic? It comes from the Greek letter chi, which is an X. And what you should know is that, I'm just giving you a little technicality here, is that everything in the beginning, they kind of match up at the beginning and the end, and everything is pointing towards something in the middle of that X, which is the main point. Okay? And so he's shaping it around some things, and what you're going to discover that he's going to say, let's see if you can begin to discover what the main point of the poem is. Are you ready? Let's start reading through it. Verse 4, a generation goes and a generation comes, but the earth remains forever. The sun rises and the sun goes down, and it hastens to the place where it rises. The wind blows to the south and goes around to the north. Around and around goes the wind, and on its circuits the wind returns. All streams run to the sea, but the sea is not full. To the place where the streams flow, there they flow again. Hint, hint. Are you ready? All things are full of, what does this say, church? Weariness. Everything is so tiring. Everything is so exhausting. A man cannot utter it. The eye is not satisfied with seeing, nor the ear filled with hearing. What has been is what will be, and what has been done is what will be done. And there is, say it with me, there is nothing new under the sun. There's nothing new under the sun. Is there a thing which it is said, see, this is new? It's been already in the ages before us, he says. There's no remembrance of former things, nor will there be any remembrance of later things yet to be among those who come after. So his main point in the poem, that it could entitle this poem, what do you think it is? Everything is, say it with me, what? Wearisome. Everything is so tiring. It's like life on a treadmill. There's a lot of activity. We're all really busy. Man, we're busy all week. We're doing all kinds of things. And what he's saying is, man, I'm going 100 miles an hour and I'm just so tired. I'm chasing after everything that I possibly can, maybe to find some fulfillment, some satisfaction. You know what Solomon could entitle this poem in our vernacular today? I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired. I'm worn out. Now, when he says I'm tired, it's not just because he had a hard day or whatever. It's not that. It's more of this way I am feeling in my life right now. I'm tired of life. I'm tired of it. I feel like, what's the advantage of me going on and continuing? Do you feel the desperation? All right? Maybe you can relate to this video. Watch this real quick, okay? You're out there. You're trying to make it happen, right? You get on the wheel like everybody else, and it's like, man, I'm grinding away. Here I go. Hey, I'm going to get on with you. Next thing you know, life overwhelms you. It's going too fast for you now. Heck, you even get thrown off on the weekend. And now it's the weekend, and now I'm just hanging on for another week. But you know what? Monday rolls back around, doesn't it, folks? And you got to get back on the wheel. And here we go again. Life is so wearisome. Verses 4 through 11, he's pointing to this kind of this rhythm of life. It's this rhythm of, and he's going to use nature. He's going to look outside of himself, and he's going to take a look around. And he has a lot of wisdom because God has given him this. And he has some experiences and I want to tell you what he sees, okay? What Solomon sees is he sees a course that is never ending, that is just continual. And he says this, he starts in verse 4, he says, one generation's coming in, another generation's going out. He's looking at this. He's saying, and I said this last week, I know he came up with Dust in the Wind long before the rock band Kansas ever did. He's saying we just go back to dust and then it's gone. It's over. It's like, you think of it like this. It's like Solomon is sitting, he's having coffee in the morning. He's thinking, about his life. He's thinking about the fact that maybe he's got the newspaper, if they were using that back then, and he's looking, and I know when I was in Brownwood, a smaller town, they had in the newspaper there, they had on one side, they had birth announcements, and on the other side, they had what? The obituary. And you would look, and my dad would always say, I was just looking to see if I was in there, okay? All right? And here's what he's saying. It could be like on my street, 2 houses down from me, there's a family that's celebrating a birth, and across the street from me, there could be a family that's grieving a death. People are coming and people are going. What do we know? Solomon, he is like frustrated. He's raging against death. He's struggling with the idea that death is coming for him. And he doesn't know how to handle this. Remember, he doesn't have the lens that you and I are able to look back upon. I really wanted you to catch that last week, because without it, it does really leave us in a place of desperation. And that's not what I'm trying to drive you to, but I think it's important that we confront our mortality, that we think about something. Solomon wants us to. He's thinking about it. Now, we talked from the believer's standpoint in looking back on what Jesus did. We know this, that because of the resurrection, because of Jesus' death on the cross, we know this, that like the Apostle Paul, he had a different view, knowing death was coming for him. Paul was in prison. He would soon thereafter be beheaded by Nero. But Paul would say these words about death: "Where, O death, is your victory? Where, O death, is your sting?" How come these guys could look at this in two different lights? Solomon didn't have the advantage of knowing this truth or fully comprehending what the Messiah would do. Jesus' own disciples didn't even fully get it until after the resurrection. So what he's saying is, man, I feel like I'm working so hard. I'm trying to find. Life is also just full of surprises. I had a surprise this week. I went to work out on Tuesday, and I had a busy week, okay? And I had a day where all day on Tuesday, I had meetings all day. And I've been trying to work out first thing in the morning to kind of get it out of the way, but I didn't that day because I was so tired, because the night before I started school again. I'm working on something, a new degree, and so I was working on a paper the night before, so I was just tired, man. I was so tired. I get home, it's about 5 o'clock, and I'm telling you, man, all I wanted to do was just plop down in a chair. But I know that when I do that, I know that I'm not getting back up. So I went, I changed clothes, I walked down to the gym in our neighborhood, and I went in there, and I remember thinking while I was walking down there, what am I doing? I'm so sick of this. I'm tired. I just want to rest, and I went through most of my workout. I got to the very last set as I was lifting some weights, and I went down to pull a weight off of the rack. I was the only one in the gym, in our gym there, and as I did this, something like struck out at me, okay? Take a look at this, okay? And I'm like, what in the world is that? Are you kidding me? That was this Tuesday, and this is in my neighborhood gym. I was by myself. You can see what that is, right? Okay? All right, I'm like, and at first, I thought, somebody's punking me right now. Where are you, Randy? Where are you? I know you're in here. And I was like, is that I don't even think that's a real snake. And I went back down to try to get that off again. It struck at me again. And I thought, oh my goodness, this is a real snake. I lost my mind. If it is on video, it's going viral. Because I lost my mind. It was the last thing I was expecting to find in the weight room. I've heard of snakes on a plane. I've never heard of snakes in the gym. What are you talking about? Now you may be thinking, what happened to the snake? My friends, in the moment of shock, it's all about fight or flight. And at that moment, I don't know why, but I decided to fight and finish my workout. So I wrestled with the beast, okay? We wrestled through there, and it all came down to survival of the fittest, and I was fitter on that day. I know I'll get some emails from that, and at the time, I didn't know if it was venomous or not, had no idea. It was probably just a rat snake or a water snake. My wife actually looked it up, and she said it wasn't venomous. You say, how big was it, Pastor Bart? About like this, okay? But it was big to me, and I'm like, what is it doing in here? And I was on my way. I finished the workout. I was walking home. I actually called Randy. I was like, you are never going to believe this. And by the way, I thought it was you. And I said, I told him about this, and I told him by the end of the week, he was like, are you kidding me? I was like, no. I said, by the end of the week, it's going to be this. When I tell the story, that's what it was. That is exactly what it was. It's the one from Grand Prairie. Made its way all the way over to Eagle Mountain, and it's huge, right? But seriously, while I was walking home, I remember thinking, I got to work this into a message somehow, even if it doesn't fit. I remember thinking while I was walking home, man, isn't it crazy? All I was trying to do today was do the right thing, press through, work hard, and it could have killed me. Okay, we know that it couldn't have, but I didn't know that at that point. For that matter, I could have been hit by a car on the way home that day. It happens. We know that kind of stuff happens, right? And the point is we get to this place when we start thinking like that, and Solomon was certainly thinking like that. What is the point then? I'm even trying to do the right thing, and it's just all exhausting. I don't get this. And Solomon next describes his understanding, and he's going to use these images that you can relate to, okay? And he's looking at some things in nature, and he says the sun. Think about the sun. It feels like it's just running in circles. And yes, at this point, he didn't understand that the earth was revolving around it. From his vantage point, it was like the sun. And he uses this word, it hastens to come up. It hastens. The word literally means this. It's like the sun is out of breath trying to catch up. That's what it means. And you know that some nights it's like you lay down, you close your eyes, and you know these are disappointing mornings when you wake up and you're like, that didn't even feel like I slept. I don't even feel that. I'm so tired. And then he's going to talk about the wind, and it's how it's blowing all over the place. And then he's going to talk about water, and this big idea is how the river just flows into the sea. And the sea is never full. And it just keeps repeating this over and over again. It evaporates, it rains. And it's like, all right, so here's what he's seeing. He's seeing this unending kind of thing, but write this down also, okay? What he's seeing is Solomon sees an unchanging cycle. He sees that it's like this isn't changing. And he talks about sun and wind and water and people being born and people dying and one generation coming and going. And Solomon is saying the world just keeps going. Even if I'm not here, it feels like life on a treadmill. Because here's the thing, we're active, but a lot of us are really going nowhere. And we're stuck in this rut, and you may feel like that today, and it may be resonating with you, or online it resonates with you because there's so much activity, but am I really making any progress? Am I really getting anywhere? Is what I'm doing, is it really mattering? And so this is his point. You know what? Nothing is even new to me anymore. There's nothing. You may be like, well, what about people, right? I mean, we've grown. People have changed. I heard another pastor bring this up, and I thought this was great. All right, and I want to bring it up with you. I mean, surely we've evolved, right? We're a lot better than they were back then. Do you think that we are better than those people who lived in Solomon's age? Do you think we're more moral today? What do you think? I think we know the answer to that. One guy wrote this: the children now, they love luxury. They have bad manners, contempt for authority. They show disrespect for their elders. You say, yeah, man, that feels so much like today. You know who said that? Again, I heard this from another pastor. Socrates, 2,400 years ago. What Solomon is saying is that, now, obviously, he didn't have an iPhone back then. So you're like, oh, well, he's wrong. No, what Solomon is saying is I'm not talking about technological advances. What I'm talking about is this human nature that we have within us. And it's this, that we're going after this, and you feel the tension. It's tense. He's struggling. And then he gets to verse 8. Remember, it's the high point, and he just finally says, all things are full of weariness. Man cannot utter it. The eye is not satisfied with seeing, nor the ear filled with hearing. What he's saying, I can't even put it into adequate words. And he was very eloquent in speech. There's always more to see. There's always more to hear. And I can just keep pursuing and pursuing and pursuing. But you know what? It's always just going to be the same. There's nothing new. Nothing new. And the gist of what he's getting at, again, it's not a technological thing that he's not saying we don't invent things. He's not saying that we can't grow. He's not saying that. But the condition of mankind, humanity under the cursed world, it stays the same, even in our technological advances. You and I both know that we still can be so very evil in the way that we treat each other, in the way that we behave, the way that we chase after the same things that this guy chased after 3,000 years ago. Remember, life under the sun is this reference to a sin-cursed world. It's this key that and I want you to see this, in all of what we have read so far, have you heard one mention of God? Is this in the Bible? Yeah. You'd have thought he'd have said something about God. Well, he didn't at this point. And so what he's talking about is this life under the sun, that when we live as ourselves at the center of our universe, and here's what he's saying, and he has such a pessimistic outcome about this. His view is that this point of view of his life is just this. It's that when it's all about me, it just feels so meaningless. Now, interestingly enough, there's another one of the writers of the Bible. We don't know exactly who wrote this. It could have been his father, David, who wrote many of the Psalms. We don't know for sure, but we know that it was somewhere in the same vicinity of time when Solomon wrote. And I want you to hear just quickly, I won't have time to read all of this, but I want you to hear a little bit of the difference of a man-centered view when he looks at nature and the difference. See if you can see the difference. This writer writes, Psalm 104, "Let all that I am praise the Lord," he says. "Oh, Lord my God, how great you are. You're robed with honor and majesty. You're dressed in the robe of light. You stretch out the starry curtain of the heavens." He's looking out. He's seeing the same nature that Solomon sees. "You lay out the rafters of your home in the rain clouds. You make the clouds your chariot. You ride upon the wings of the wind." He's going to mention wind. He's going to mention rain. He's going to mention all of the same things that Solomon mentions. Verse 7, he says, "At your command, the water fled. At the sound of your thunder, it hurried away. Mountains rose. Valleys sank to the levels you decreed. Then you set a firm boundary for the seas so they would never again cover the earth. You make springs pour water into the ravines." Okay, and you could keep reading. I don't have time to read the rest of that, but what I want you to know is that there's an incredibly different outlook that Solomon was having as he was looking at nature than what this particular writer was seeing. Who was at the center of this psalm? Was it man? God, because he said, "God, you did this. You were in the midst of this. You created this. You made this," right? All of this creation is pointing towards your glory, God. And so what he sees is that God is at the center. But Solomon has this pessimistic view as he looks at it. Solomon is leaving God out of the equation, which is what so many of us do. Even as believers, many of us can live as, we've heard it said this way before, as practical atheists. We say we believe in God, but we live as if there is not a God. And I point you to this today, okay? Because Solomon at this point, for whatever reason in his life, at this place of desperation, has forgotten that there is one who is not under the sun. He has forgotten that there is one who is not bound to the limitations or the cycles of time and toil or being under the sun, which is, by the way, where we currently live and where we are. We know that we are when it's under the sun, we are in a sin-cursed world. You and I both know this, right? This world is broken. It is messed up. All you got to do is just look and see. Our bodies are broken. The weather is broken, you know, and you got to hear this. That is not how God designed this to be. The reason it is the way that it is, God said that if we sinned against him, and he told mankind in the garden, if you sin against me, that there is going to be a curse that comes along with this, and you have a choice to do this. Solomon is looking through this lens of fallen creation, and Solomon is also looking through a lens of what we talked about last week, is this idea of, it's a theological term of progressive revelation, is that he hasn't fully realized what the Messiah was going to be about. Okay, and you can listen online to learn more about that. I'm trying to remind you of these lenses because it can be so depressing if you look at this through the wrong lens. Life under the sun is life under a sin-cursed world. And what Jesus would tell us is under this sin-cursed world, don't be surprised when bad things are happening. Even, listen, this is the hard part, even to good people. Because it rains on the just and the unjust. Jesus said those words. God told Adam, after they sinned, life apart from him would be filled with toil. Remember, Adam was working, and there was no sin yet. So it wasn't work was the curse, but here's what God said. Now your work is going to be cursed. And what you're going to experience is going to be toil. Now, so he's looking around. He's seeing all of this in nature, but here's what he does next, okay? And we'll hurry here. He looks within himself, and he starts to see through his experiences. And he says, I, the preacher, have been king over Israel and Jerusalem. And I applied my heart. Every time you see the word heart, you need to know that he's not talking about the organ here. He's talking about in the Hebrew mind, the heart is the mind, the will, and the emotion. It makes up who we are. And he says, he's going to say, I applied every bit of myself. I didn't leave anything out to seek and to search out by wisdom all that is done under heaven. It is an unhappy business that God has given to the children of man to be, come on church, what? Busy with. I've seen everything that is done under the sun, and behold, all is vanity. It's all here, there it goes. It's vanity. It's havel. And then he's going to add this. It's like chasing after the wind. Some of you are really fit. I know that, okay? I challenge you, though. When you go out of here today, I don't know if it's windy today or not. Pick a day where it's windy. See if you can catch the wind. See if you can finally catch up with the wind. It's this rat race. It's this treadmill is what he's getting at. And look, verse 15, what is crooked cannot be made straight. What he's saying is, I look and there's injustice everywhere. And then he says, what is lacking cannot be counted. What he's saying here is there's never enough. Nothing ever fully satisfies. Verse 16, I said in my heart, I have acquired great wisdom, surpassing all who were ever over Jerusalem, or who were over Jerusalem before me, other kings, and my heart has had great experience of wisdom and knowledge. And I applied my heart to know wisdom and knowledge, and know madness and folly. I perceive that this also is but a striving after wind, for in much wisdom is much vexation, and he who increases knowledge increases sorrow. In other words, here's what he's saying here, okay? I'm looking at nature and I see this, and I'm looking within and I'm looking at my past, I'm looking at my experiences, and Solomon sees this, that his knowledge that he has gained is actually, it's painful and it hurts. The more that he learns about life, the more that he discovers, man, this life is tiring, this life is painful, this life can hurt. And what he's saying is, I'm king, and I have more resources than anybody. I have anything I want at my command. I have unlimited authority. I have unlimited of all of this. Even God has given me wisdom. And here's what I'm discovering. The more I learn in life, the more I'm figuring out, man, life is really painful. Life really hurts. It's kind of like this, okay? I did a couple of funerals this week for people who were believers in our church, and both of them, they were believers. We celebrated their homegoing, but there were tears there, as there should be. There was grief. But I also noticed a little boy who was there in one of the funerals, and I don't know how old he was, but he was running around, and I can assure you this, he had no idea what the gravity of what was going on that day. He didn't know. So he's laughing, he's playing. But you and I both know that as we get older and we gain more knowledge and we gain more experience and we look around more and we see the stuff that's going on, we know this. We know that life under the sun, it is painful. It does hurt. It's painful for us when we see our friends or our loved ones go through things. It's one thing when we go through it, but when they go through it, and it hurts so much when we learn certain things. This life is hard, and Solomon is saying, and so what I did was, in order to try to understand it, or try to get a grasp on it, or try to find meaning in it, I went after it from every angle. I got on every treadmill I could get on to try to get to the end and get my hands around, but I never could. It's like chasing the wind. Heard this illustration, I thought it was good, and I remember doing this with a dog I had. It was a yellow lab that I had, and I love that dog, and he was so playful. And if you take a laser pointer, have you ever done one of those with an animal, with a cat or with a dog, and they see it, and my dog, I would like put it right in front of his face, and he would even get cross-eyed looking at it, okay? And then he would jump on it, and he would think he would have it, but it wasn't there. It was gone, and we would laugh. We also had a cat, okay? And I would say it was my daughter's cat. It wasn't our cat, it was hers. You know I don't like cats, but anyhow, so the dog and cat got along. I decided, well, I'll put the dot on the cat and see what the dog does, okay? Again, I know I'll get emails for that. Now, it was funny. They played, okay? They played. And but it's funny watching pets chase after something we know they're never going to catch. But here is the reality. It's tragic watching people chase after it. And we see that on a regular basis. We know they'll never catch it. And it's sad. And he said, it's like I chased it all with all of my heart, chasing after the wind. And through the rest of this book, what he's going to do is he's going to talk about the ways he chased it. He's going to talk about the pursuits. Some are wisdom, some are pursuits of folly. He went in both directions to both extremes. Now, in summation, here is what he's getting at. And here are these things that at some point you have to just kind of come to terms with about life under the sun. These truths about it is there's something wrong with everything. Something's always missing, and most things are just flat out of my control. And I try to control them, but even though I can't, I've learned this, and I'm still trying to learn it. All I can really control is a hula hoop that's around me. And here's what I've also learned. Even knowing that, I sometimes don't do a very good job of controlling that. When I was a kid and I was at Eagle Mountain Elementary, I told my wife this week. She's a teacher over there. I said, I was a kid who got an N in needs improvement in his conduct, and my teacher would write, lacks self-control. I know you find that hard to believe, but that was the problem. And so when I think about what Solomon's getting at, okay, he went to extremes to catch this apart from God. And once we begin to understand life under the sun, this is what it is. We can't expect it to be heaven yet because it's not. This is what it is, and so it helps us. It doesn't mean it's easier in that it goes away. It just helps us and frees us up to understand, especially through the lens, if you are a believer, of understanding this truth, right? These things that we're chasing after will never truly, completely fulfill us the way a relationship with Jesus will. It won't. Some of us have been on the treadmill. Maybe you're on the treadmill today. You're chasing after something, right? You're trying to find something to fill your void that you have within you. You're trying to find that. You're chasing, or maybe it's just you're chasing something you're hoping will help you cope with some of the problems that you're facing right now. And this treadmill, you've been on the treadmill your entire life. And you know what? Here's what I know, because I see it every day. You're tired. You're so weary. You're sick and tired of being sick and tired because you've been active your entire life. You've been pursuing. You've been had a lot of activity and effort. And here is what you know. You're still in the same place as when you started. Last service, I got up to close to 2 miles on that. I'm going slower on this one here today on the second service. I'm about at 1.5 miles. But here's the reality. I've been going, but I haven't gone anywhere. I'm right here. Right here. What area of a treadmill are you on? Maybe it's that next purchase. Oh, that'll be the fix, right? Or maybe it's chasing after money and, oh, I got this job, but then you find that's not enough. Or maybe it's approval. You're on the treadmill of, if I could just get people to like me and everyone to, to feel this way about me. Or if I could just get the next degree. Now, all these things right here, they're not all bad. It's just that when we're looking for meaning in those things, you are going to find that. That's not going to satisfy. And what Jesus says is instead of investing in something that is so temporal, it's here and it's gone, Jesus calls us to invest in things in our life that are eternal. And that is a relationship with Him, and that is the way that we love each other, the way that we treat each other. We live on mission with Him every day. He said, I want to give you an abundant life, not this tiring, exhausting, life. I want to give you a life. And I did this. I became one of you. I died on the cross in your place, in my place. I took your penalty that you deserve, not me. I took it for you. I stood in the gap for you. And not only did I die and overcome sin, I've been raised from the dead. I took on sin and death and Satan. I took all of that on so that you could have abundant, eternal life with me forever. Stop your raging against death because you don't need to anymore. Jesus said these words, if any of you want to be my follower, you must give up your own way. He says, take up your cross and follow me. If you try to hang on to your life, you will lose it. But if you give up your life for my sake and for the sake of the good news, you will save it. Now watch. And what do you benefit if you gain the whole world but lose your own soul? Solomon said, I gained it all. Solomon said, life is wearisome. Jesus flips the script on Solomon. Life is wearisome. Jesus says to you and me, come to me. Those of you who are weary, who are heavy laden, who are burdened down, and I will give you in this life. What will I give you, church? Rest. You mean I can get off the treadmill? Jesus invites you today to get off the treadmill with Him. Do you hear that? What do you hear? Peace. Nothing. That's a lot of racket. And He invites you into that today. I want to ask you to bow your heads with me. Solomon said there's nothing new under the sun. Jesus said this, behold, I am making all things new. As a believer, what he tells us, he says this, I'm going to make a new heaven and a new earth one day. Solomon, he had this understanding of this that you and I, many times, we think like a person that doesn't know the Lord. Jesus flips it all around and he says, I want you to trust in me. I want to be in your life and I want to provide. I want to provide this rest in your life. And you can get off of the treadmill. You can quit pursuing. Solomon said, I pursued all these other things. Jesus said, seek first the kingdom of God and His righteousness. Some of you, maybe you've never put your faith in Jesus as your Savior. You've been on a treadmill, maybe of even religion. But I want you to know, Jesus says, that's not how you come into relationship with me. It's through faith in Christ, by grace, through faith. Right now, where you're at, and you're online, maybe you've never trusted Jesus. Put your faith in Jesus. Call upon Him to save you. believers, maybe you feel like you've been living on the treadmill. Maybe you're frustrated. Maybe you're disillusioned and overwhelmed, and you're tempted to wonder why. Jesus is inviting those of you who are weary to come to him, get off the treadmill,